That evening, as the Plumfield boys sat on the steps, as usual, in the mild September moonlight, they naturally fell to talking of the event of the day. Emil began by breaking out, in his impetuous way, "Uncle Fritz is the wisest, and Uncle Laurie the jolliest, but Uncle John was the best, and I'd rather be like him than any man I ever saw." "So would I. Did you hear what those gentlemen said to Grandpa today? I would like to have that said of me when I was dead." And Franz felt with regret that he had not appreciated Uncle John enough. "What did they say?" asked Jack, who had been much impressed by the scenes of the day. "Why, one of the partners of Mr. Lawrence, where Uncle John has been ever so long, was saying that he was conscientious almost to a fault as a businessman, and above reproach in all things. Another gentleman said no money could repay the fidelity and honesty with which Uncle John had served him. And then Grandpa told them the best of all. Uncle John once had a place in the office of a man who cheated, and when this man wanted Uncle to help him do it, Uncle wouldn't, though he was offered a big salary. The man was angry and said, 'You will never get on in business with such strict principles.' And Uncle answered back, 'I never will try to get on without them,' and left the place for a much harder and poorer one." "Good!" cried several of the boys warmly, for they were in the mood to understand and value the little story as never before. "He wasn't rich, was he?" asked Jack. "No." "He never did anything to make a stir in the world, did he?" "No." "He was only good?" "That's all." And Franz found himself wishing that Uncle John had done something to boast of, for it was evident that Jack was disappointed by his replies. "Only good, that is all, and everything," said Mr. Bear, who had overheard the last few words and guessed what was going on in the minds of the lads. "Let me tell you a little about John Brooke, and you will see why men honor him, and why he was satisfied to be good rather than rich or famous. He simply did his duty in all things, and did it so cheerfully, so faithfully, that it kept him patient and brave, and happy through poverty and loneliness and years of hard work. He was a good son, and gave up his own plans to stay and live with his mother while she needed him. He was a good friend, and taught Laurie much beside his Greek and Latin, did it unconsciously, perhaps, by showing him an example of an upright man. He was a faithful servant, and made himself so valuable to those who employed him that they will find it hard to fill his place. He was a good husband and father, so tender, wise, and thoughtful, that Laurie and I learned much of him, and only knew how well he loved his family when we discovered all he had done for them, unsuspected and unassisted." Mr. Bear stopped a minute, and the boys sat like statues in the moonlight, until he went on again, in a subdued but earnest voice. "As he lay dying, I said to him, 'Have no care for Meg and the little ones. I will see that they never want.' Then he smiled and pressed my hand, and answered in his cheerful way, 'No need of that. I have cared for them.' And so he had, for when we looked among his papers, all was in order, not a debt remained, and safely put away was enough to keep Meg comfortable and independent. Then we knew why he had lived so plainly, denied himself so many pleasures, except that of charity, and worked so hard that I fear he shortened his good life. He never asked help for himself, though often for others, but bore his own burden and worked out his own task, bravely and quietly. No one can say a word of complaint against him, so just and generous and kind was he, and now, when he is gone, all find so much to love and praise and honor, that I am proud to have been his friend, and would rather leave my children the legacy he leaves than the largest fortune ever made. Yes, simple, generous goodness is the best capital to found the business of this life upon. It lasts when fame and money fail, and is the only riches we can take out of this world with us. Remember that, my boys, and if you want to earn respect and confidence and love, follow in the footsteps of John Brooke." When Demi returned to school after some weeks at home, he seemed to have recovered from his loss, with the blessed elasticity of childhood, and so he had in a measure, but he did not forget, for his was a nature into which things sank deeply, to be pondered over, and absorbed into the soil where the small virtues were growing fast. He played and studied, worked and sang, just as before, and few suspected any change, but there was one, and Aunt Jo saw it, for she watched over the boy with her whole heart, trying to fill John's place in her poor way. He seldom spoke of his loss, but Aunt Jo often heard a stifled sobbing in the little bed at night, and when she went to comfort him, all his cry was, "I want my father! Oh, I want my father!" For the tie between the two had been a very tender one, and the child's heart bled when it was broken. But time was kind to him, and slowly he came to feel that father was not lost, only invisible for a while, and sure to be found again, well and strong and fond as ever, even though his little son should see the purple asters blossom on his grave many, many times before they met. To this belief Demi held fast, and in it found both help and comfort, because it led him unconsciously through a tender longing for the father whom he had seen, to a childlike trust in the Father whom he had not seen. Both were in heaven, and he prayed to both, trying to be good for love of them. The outward change corresponded to the inward, for in those few weeks Demi seemed to have grown tall, and began to drop his childish plays, not as if ashamed of them, as some boys do, but as if he had outgrown them, and wanted something manlier. He took to the hated arithmetic, and held on so steadily that his uncle was charmed, though he could not understand the whim, until Demi said, "I am going to be a bookkeeper when I grow up, like Papa, and I must know about figures and things, else I can't have nice, neat ledgers like his." At another time he came to his aunt with a very serious face, and said, "What can a small boy do to earn money?" "Why do you ask, my dearie?" "My father told me to take care of Mother and the little girls, and I want to, but I don't know how to begin." "He did not mean now, Demi, but by and by, when you are large." "But I wish to begin now, if I can, because I think I ought to make some money to buy things for the family. I am 10, and other boys, no bigger than I, earn pennies sometimes." "Well, then, suppose you rake up all the dead leaves and cover the strawberry bed. I'll pay you $1 for the job," said Aunt Jo. "Isn't that a great deal? I could do it in one day. You must be fair and not pay too much, because I want to truly earn it." "My little John, I will be fair, and not pay a penny too much. Don't work too hard, and when that is done, I will have something else for you to do," said Mrs. Jo, much touched by his desire to help, and his sense of justice, so like his scrupulous father. When the leaves were done, many barrow loads of chips were wheeled from the wood to the shed, and another $1 earned. Then Demi helped cover the school books, working in the evenings under Franz's direction, tugging patiently away at each book, letting no one help, and receiving his wages with such satisfaction that the dingy bills became quite glorified in his sight. "Now I have $1 for each of them, and I should like to take my money to Mother all myself, so she can see that I have minded my father." So Demi made a duteous pilgrimage to his mother, who received his little earnings as a treasure of great worth, and would have kept it untouched if Demi had not begged her to buy some useful thing for herself and the women children, whom he felt were left to his care. This made him very happy, and though he often forgot his responsibilities for a time, the desire to help was still there, strengthening with his years. He always uttered the words, "My father," with an air of gentle pride, and often said, as if he claimed a title full of honor, "Don't call me Demi any more. I am John Brooke now." So, strengthened by a purpose and a hope, the little lad of 10 bravely began the world, and entered into his inheritance the memory of a wise and tender father, the legacy of an honest name.